Hi, welcome to my first YouTube video here to check out Nikon's newest camera, the mirrorless Z7. In this video, I hope to kind of cover my comparisons and initial thoughts after having used it for the last few days and kind of sharing the point of view I'm coming at from, which is as a wedding photographer currently using the D850, which I'm shooting this video with, and kind of comparing the two. I'm planning on covering less of the in-depth technical aspects of this camera, as there's plenty of videos online, plenty of side-by-side comparisons you can read, and more talking about just how the camera feels when I go to use it. The biggest thing as a photographer is being able to trust your equipment and just be able to pick up and use it without having to think. And coming from the D850, there's an interesting mix of some things that are really quick and easy to pick up on, others not so much. So I plan on sharing some of the pros and cons, and that's pretty much what we're going to do. I would also note this is probably my 12th or 15th take, and it's one video, so as I stumble around, I'm just going to go with it. First off is just how the camera feels. It's very light, comfortable, but also very solid. Feels great to hold. It's got a nice deep grip. The ergonomics just feel comfortable all around. Looking at the outside of the camera, you've got your screen very similar to the D850. Obviously, the electronic viewfinder is completely new if you're used to a mirror, which is definitely a weird thing to get used to for me. The battery uses the same format as the other cameras that Nikon has, which makes it nice to be able to swap between this, my 750, my D850, my D810 seamlessly. The only difference, the addition being that it can charge via USB on the camera, which might be nice on the go or in a hotel room, that sort of thing if you forget your charger, but have your cell phone charger. My understanding is that's how it works. Another feature on the outside, some of the different changes from their other cameras, being the new OLED screen on the top, which is dark with white lettering and numbering, which I found to work really good outside in bright sunlight, as well as in darker rooms where it's always very visible and easy to see, and it also changes its brightness in whatever situation you're in. So it's brighter outside, darker inside, which is really neat. One thing that's missing that bums me out is the autofocus button that used to be on the side of the lens. I now have it assigned to function 1, so I do that and then can use my front and back knobs just as I had before. But there's something about the ergonomics of holding the camera, pressing the button and do it that I find a little easier than do with this, so that'll take some getting used to. But I do wish on the top screen what's missing is being able to see what focus mode you're in. You're not going to know without looking through the viewfinder or at the back screen. So another addition is the U1, U2, and U3 settings to recall your user settings, which is something that Nikon's flagship cameras have not had, while the cheaper models do. So that'll be a neat feature that I haven't used since my D7000 forever ago, that I might find useful at times to use, so we'll see. Finally, the card slot is obviously the big thing people are complaining about and wondering why there's only one. So admittedly, as a wedding photographer, at this point, I wouldn't use this as my primary camera. Just have less risk with multiple cards. That doesn't mean I wouldn't use it as a backup or a second camera. It seems plenty capable. The interesting thing to note about the CF card, or I'm sorry, the XQD card, as compared to, say, the D850, where it has a button, this is a spring action, which I'm not a huge fan of. It seems to kind of get stuck partially on the way out. I also have the feeling long term, it's nicer to have a button than a spring that could fail, but admittedly, I've never had one fail on any of my cameras, so probably not a huge concern. The last thing to note on kind of the outside, besides obviously the change of the button layout, no longer having stuff on the left side, it's all moved to the right, but it feels very ergonomic, so even in the camera I found myself picking up on it very quickly, which was nice. One thing that would have been nice to have, though, that, say, the D850, not introduced, but I enjoyed back in the day with like my D3 or D3X, was having the illuminated buttons. That would have been cool. I noticed early this morning I was testing out low light autofocus, and being in the dark, I couldn't see my buttons, had to turn on the light, check things, and then turn it back off, which is something you don't have to do with, say, the D850 or Nikon's other flagship models. The last thing to note about the outside and the screen is that it articulates similar to the D850, but they definitely changed the hinge design. So now it doesn't go fully down like the old one would have. but not really a big deal. Occasionally I like to get above crowds, be able to see down, so still being able to do that's great. Overall, no real complaints from what I could tell. So moving on to some other aspects of the camera, obviously you've got the new Z mount as opposed to the F mount, which is much larger, to enable new glass designs and such, and obviously the distance between the sensor and the glass, you just can't use the old lenses, except with the adapter, which I'll cover shortly. One thing that I like about this is it looks a lot easier to clean than mine, not having the mirror, having it around the surface. The flip side of that is I have the feeling it's going to be way easier to get dust and other particles on it. I think occasionally if I have to shoot in a rain storm or something like that, like I did earlier this year during a wedding, switching lenses, you're going to have a much higher risk of getting water on the sensor, which will probably be a nightmare to try to edit out later. Other than that, it seems really cool and I've enjoyed using it so far. Kind of moving on to some of the other points, the EFV. So using an electronic viewfinder is very different if you're not used to it. Some of the things that I like about it are it's very sharp, very clear, very easy to use. I had not been used to that, though I have owned the Fuji X100, which was a fun little camera and had that. One of the nice aspects I find of that over looking through a normal viewfinder is having the ability to see actually what your exposure for that shot is. So instead of using your screen and trying to look in the sun, you can look right into the camera and see exactly what the camera sees as opposed to what your eye sees, which can vary a little bit when you're looking at exposure. So it's nice to be able to put your face right up to the camera and get that information. Another thing I actually really like thinking about it now looking is the EFV, the viewfinder is back off of the screenaways, which is really nice because when you have a gross sweaty face in the middle of wedding season and your face is smashed up against the camera and getting your screen all gross, in this sense that I don't feel my face going up against the screen, which is nice, so I'm not occasionally wiping the screen. Some of the other things I do like about the EFV is the way the focus works. If you're, say, doing one of the finer point focuses, like the pinpoint focus, which I like to use occasionally via live view, but now you can have it in camera so you can zoom in and then do your focus and take your shot, which is really great. Other things like the focus peaking, which is a feature I've really liked in my D850 for doing fine focusing manually, you can now do through the viewfinder, which is really great instead of the live screen. The biggest complaint, which I feel like could be a real easy fix via firmware update, is being able to zoom in and then critically focus, where now it only works at 100% if it's all the way back. If you go to zoom in, that feature isn't available. I don't know why. I feel like it should be an easy fix, but maybe there's a reason I'm not aware of. Another great thing shooting with is obviously the quiet shutter. It's way quieter. You don't have that mirror flap. That would be really great for shooting weddings, just that much quieter, though I have no real complaints with what I'm already using. Another thing is the lens adapter. So being able to use all of my old glass has been really great. I'm going to show you some of that right now. So it comes with the adapter, which is very lightweight, but at the same time feels very solid, so it doesn't really change the feel of the camera too much. Obviously this looks pretty awkward with my 105 1.4, but everything has worked flawlessly, the focusing, metering, all of that, of course. So it's nice to just put on the glass you're used to and have it work exactly the same as if it's on the camera. The one additional feature is obviously the vibration reduction that's kind of part as the stabilization in the sensor, though I feel like I haven't noticed it so much even though I have it on. So lenses like this that don't have VR should now have VR via the sensor, but I feel like I've had a hard time noticing it working. So I almost question whether it does on this camera or if there's an issue with this particular copy, but I don't know. It'll take more playing with to find out. Like I said, the lens adapter works excellent, no problems whatsoever. Kind of one of the, I want to touch base on video a little bit, even though I don't normally shoot video. One thing I was excited about with the Z7 is the ability to do video way better than we have in the past with the obvious limitations of DSLRs. So with the 850, obviously great video, huge step up from what we've ever had, But this is where this camera shines. Obviously, like I said, I don't do video, but I'm looking to in the future. And I've picked this up and I'm really excited now to get something like a Ronin S, you know, for stabilization and shooting some video with. What I thought worked really great, obviously the video is very high quality, 4K UHD, is the adjustable speed of the autofocus to give you that very professional look. So I found this to just work pretty flawlessly using like the AF mode, which is semi-automatic, and then set your speed so you can pan around, zoom, and have it slowly automatically focus, and it really nails it. So super impressed with the video quality and really excited to learn more about shooting video and having this camera to do it with. The other thing I would note is that using the 24-70, the kit lens, which I also want to talk about briefly, the video is really great and quiet. The autofocus is a much different system than we're used to. The biggest issue with shooting with the AFS lenses is an obnoxious clicking as it's autofocusing. It sounds like a machine gun, like really annoying to use those lenses. So if you're shooting professional video, you're probably doing your own miking or you know, voiceovers, whatever, that you're not going to hear that, but while shooting it's slightly irritating to hear as you're working. Other than that, not much more to note on the video. Again, I don't do a lot of video, but that's where this camera I could see really shine. So moving on to some of the cons of this camera that I found a little disappointing is the fact that I don't feel comfortable enough with the camera even after a few days that I'm just going to pick up and start using it for a session that I'm being paid for. I haven't found it as easy to just pick up and use compared to my D850 from previous models. It is kind of a whole new world that you need to learn how to use. But besides just that aspect, there are a couple issues that I'm having with the camera that I'm not super excited about. One of which is the autofocus, which is obviously a critical point. I don't completely trust, so I'm often shooting in continuous mode or just regular auto single mode, and having it, what it's doing is having a lot of the larger squares as opposed to the little squares we're used to. It's hard to explain unless you've seen it, but the overall auto mode looks kind of funny and you can't really tell exactly what it's focusing on, and I found it to be kind of inconsistent. That being said, using, say, the 104, I went out in the backyard doing some portraits at 1.4, nailing the eyes, so really good in that sense. But in other situations where you might have different things around, it doesn't seem to pick the thing that would seem obvious to me that it should focus on, like I can just trust my D850 to do. For some reason, it kind of hunts or just focuses on something that you wouldn't expect, which is kind of odd. Another weird thing is the autofocus continue mode, where we're used to the 3D tracking. This one's a little different, where it's again a much larger square focus point, and you use the OK button in the back to engage it. So instead of having that as an option, you're using regular continuous mode and then jumping into it via the OK button and then turning it off, which I feel like would be really annoying to do with birds or constantly changing moving subjects. If you're just following one thing, it'll work okay, but it seems a little clumsy to be using the OK button to turn it on and off, so not a huge fan of that. The other things that I found a little disappointing, but I kind of expected going into it, is some of the low light autofocusing. Like I said, waking up this morning before dawn, I was downstairs and turned off the lights, and this is where the D850 really blew me away when I bought it compared to the A10, where they got rid of the autofocus assist light, but it was just amazing to me how well it focused in the dark, where this does not do it. It hunts a lot more. You can, of course, turn on the autofocus assist light, which is handy. This one's green, it's super bright. I like to be more on incognito, again, doing weddings. If you're doing stuff at night, it's nice to not hit someone with a light and then they know you're taking a photo of them. The other thing is that being right here on the corner is, depending on the lens you're using, it kind of blocks it, so it's mostly going to be on your left side, maybe in the center. So if you want to do a composition with something on the right and use the light, it's not going to work so well. You're going to want to turn and then recompose. Those were kind of the big downsides. So like I said, at this point, I'm not regretting spending over $4,000 on this camera just yet, but it does leave a little bit to be desired. Overall, I have enjoyed it. I look forward to learning more. Again, this is just an initial review, initial thoughts, compared to using their other cameras. It is not as pick up and go as I would have hoped, and I hope that I get more used to the autofocus and that it works well. I will say that using the continuous mode outside, I had my wife running towards me, running around the yard trying to capture it, and most of them were sharp. It of course worked better with the sun on her as opposed to backlit, but I felt it had a little bit of difficulty keeping ahead in continuous mode. But again, have to play with it more. Overall though, the autofocus is kind of so-so at this point in my opinion. I'm hoping to have an improved opinion the more I use it. Finally, one of the things I want to touch base on is the kit lens. Of course, you buy this new camera, your regular lenses, it's nice to have the adapter, but they did not release a lot of lenses that excited people. Already having 35 and 50 millimeter lenses, I didn't want to buy something identical, so I went ahead and thought I would try the kit lens, which is actually kind of impressive. On its own, it would cost $1,000. With the package, just about $600, $500, I think. And that price range is good. I probably wouldn't pay more. But the lens itself functions great. It's sharp, the focus is fast, it's light. Kind of one of the neat features with these new S lenses is the focus ring. I assume everything is digital now, so it's not mechanical focus ring like we're used to. I could be wrong. But you can customize it. So you can, in the camera settings, you can set it to adjust your manual focus, you can set it to change your aperture, and you can set it to do exposure compensation, which I thought was really cool and something I would probably use. Again, having an electronic viewfinder and being able to see your photo and be able to change it. Again, doing weddings, I probably wouldn't use it because what I do is forget, so I would go to change it and forget to change it back. Thankfully, with the electronic viewfinder, that's not going to be as much of a problem. You're going to notice it, but still, it's kind of a neat feature for them to add. The other different thing about this lens is that it kind of locks back, so it doesn't start at 24 like you'd expect. It kind of clicks. You can see 24 to 70, and then it locks back in place kind of snugly, which is interesting just to make it more compact. But even wide open, I was really impressed with this lens at such high megapixels to be sharp. Overall throughout the range at f4, because I'm used to shooting 1.4 most of the time, 1.8 unless I'm using, say, my 70 to 200 2.8 zoom. So it's pretty rare that I even stop down to f4, so to have something that starts there was a little different, but I took a couple portraits with it. It looks awesome. It's again very sharp, wide open, which is not something you usually see with a slower zoom, so they did do an excellent job of that. The only complaint I have as far as the quality of the lens, which is something you'd expect with a slightly slower compact zoom, is it does vignette pretty heavily in the corners. Not heavily, trust me. I like some vignetting on my photos, softer, but this is pretty hard in the corners. Not quite to the point where you wonder if you have a filter on that's blocking it, but enough that you notice it. Of course, these are things that should be able to be fixed in Lightroom and whatnot, so probably not a big deal. At this point, Adobe hasn't quite updated Lightroom yet, so I haven't been able to pull up the raw files to edit them, but overall, you're not going to see anything spectacularly different than what you're used to in your 750, your 850. People can compare high ISOs. Honestly, it's also minimal to me. It's not a big concern, but overall, the sensor quality is, as you would expect, comparable to the D850. I assume it's maybe even a slight above, but I couldn't tell just from my little bit of testing. So overall, great camera, not 100% sold on every aspect of it yet, but I look forward to using it more. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's maybe been helpful to you in some sense as you decide whether maybe you want to buy this or not. You'll note right below this video there's an Amazon affiliate link, so if you happen to love this and purchase it through that link, I get a few bucks, which is awesome. If not, oh well. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video of the Nikon Z7 and it's helped you out. Thanks for watching.